Our first fireside chat, Transitions and Value Creation, is between two of the most renowned industry veterans, known for making some of the most remarkable contributions to their respective fields. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. K.V. Kamath, the veteran banker and the man known to have reshaped the Indian banking industry and a Padma Bhushan awardee. Mr. Kamath is presently the chairman of the National Bank for Infrastructure Development and has held prestigious positions with some of the most coveted financial institutions in his previous roles. The session will be moderated by Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Chairman and Managing Director of CyberMedia Group and founder of Indian Angel Network. He currently chairs the IIT Alumni Trust, the anchor investor and sponsor of IvyCap Ventures. So everyone, a big round of applause for both Mr. Kamath and Mr. Gupta. So I request you to please come on stage.
Mr. Kamath, it is a real pleasure for me to have this fireside chat with you. One memory which is deeply engrossed in my mind is way back in 2005. I don't think you would even remember about this, but in 2005, I was the chair of Pan IIT. We did a program here in Bombay, ICICI was one of the sponsors. And there was a dinner in which there were about 200 IITians who had come. And you, with your top leadership team, stood at the entrance and greeted each and every person and shook hands with each and every person. I mean, that was something that was really fantastic. I know of very little amount of sponsors who would ever do that kind of a thing. But it's, an absolute sign of, and a great round of applause. Vikram talked about the thunder of dragons. So I think that is what let's start with. And he said that the difference between value and valuation. So my first question to you is, that what really is it that we are talking about when we talk of value or valuation? Is it just, are we talking of speculative? Are we talking about value creation? What really is the way you, and as a former banker, look at it?
This is a good question to start the day, because this phrase has been in my mind, and I have elsewhere started speaking about this, the dichotomy of value and valuation, where whatever I have seen of young startups across, IvyCapDay, I might not have seen many, but the Fintech world discussed, engaged with them. Every single enterprise that I have looked at has created value in what they have done. The platform, the business, the idea, all these things are in place. The challenge is, and I'll come to cash flow in a minute, because the path is you create value in the platform, the business, then you create cash flows, and then you get a valuation. I think somewhere in a financial context, as a banker, I see that here there has been an attempt at times by some, I would say, pools for private money, I'm certainly not saying all pools of money, to push that value to a valuation stage in too short a time without actually going through an intermediate stage of having either cash flow positive or line of sight to cash flow positivity. I would think the two are, one of the two is required, or a continuum where you're going to reach there before you then get to the valuation, then you take to the public market. Because if you don't do that, I see it is not just a value loss to that enterprise, and of course the investors in that enterprise, but it is a value loss or an opportunity loss to others who would have come into the market or had an opportunity to come to the market, because you're now creating an environment of distrust. So to me, what you have put in, probably the first time I'm seeing a firm put this up. I've seen that they're trying to probably not talk about this, but putting it up there, right up there, I think is to your credit, and I must compliment you on this.
So a round of applause for the IvyCap team for doing that. And you're right, sir, this entire thing has been actually reversed, that you first create valuation and then cash flow is coming right at the end. But I think it is important to sort of, look at the right ingredients for that valuation. Mr. Kamath, now that you are heading NABFID, what are some of the startup opportunities that are likely to be there around the huge things that NABFID would be doing? Is it essentially a big boys play, or is there some opportunity for startups?
Let me just put a larger growth opportunity in context and try to paint where NABFID comes in, and the answer will follow. See, clearly the opportunity in India is a 25-year runway. The 25-year runway, why do I say that? You need to benchmark always in life, keep benchmarking. And I used to keep benchmarking with China going back to the time I got back from my Asian Development Bank assignment in '96. At that time, actually, we were on par. We were not behind. And then by 2004, 2005, we were 4 or 5 years behind. By 2008, 2009, we were 8 years behind. And then somewhere in the next 5, 6, 7 years, we fell way behind. And now I would think we are between 15 and 25 years behind, depending on how you look at it and how fast you want to go. I would personally like to believe that we are about 15 years behind, but we can catch up if we grow at 10 and China grows at a slower rate. Not catch up in terms of their GDP and our GDP, but where they are today. But key point here is opportunity, and I'll come to that, and that's where the ecosystem comes in. But there are 4 drivers to this opportunity. One, I think, is infrastructure, as in water and everything related to water. Because that was what was gotten right by China first. And that meets your agriculture needs, that is food. Then it meets your protein needs. So animal husbandry and agriculture is taken care of. The next big driver of growth was infrastructure. Infrastructure, not only the act of investing in infrastructure creates employment and economic momentum, then the fruits of infrastructure also create virtually a perpetual flow of, I would say, growth that will happen. So infrastructure is the key, and that's where we come in a way. And it's pervasive infrastructure in every single area of activity. You then have, classically manufacturing, which rides on that infrastructure, and we have seen China. That's happening in India now, possibly driven by domestic India, where you have a 3.5 trillion marketplace, and that itself will become, again, a source of opportunity for a lot of things that your investee companies are doing. Of course, that also brings in services. And the final piece, in any which way you look at the companies that you have in a portfolio, we will have to say that they are players who leverage digital technology. They are businesses in their own right, but they all leverage digital technology. So there is a technology piece which is, I would say, embedded in them. Now, these are the drivers of the future. Now, painting this in a little bit detail, because infrastructure that NABFID is looking at is one wedge in this piece. And I think without that wedge, a whole lot could fall. Now, typically when you talk infrastructure, you think in terms of roads, bridges, highways, ports, rail, high-speed rail, maybe bullet train, airports, and so on, power et al. But there are many other aspects of infrastructure that is required. And one key that all of you require is digital infrastructure. Now, luckily for us in India, digital infrastructure has been rolled out by private sector. And again, luckily for India, and probably with the well thought out this infrastructure is cheap, is accessible, and it's pervasive. And we probably are, again, just in time in terms of 5G. So we are coming, in a way, we are blossoming at a time when technology is ripe and technology is accessible. So just imagine, if we were trying to do this when China did this 8-10 years back, the cost of technology would have been probably 3x. So it could have been prohibitive, and it would not, as a result, have been as usable or reachable to the mass in India. So I'm just painting an ecosystem which will thrive on basic infrastructure, whether it is water, hard infrastructure, digital infrastructure, manufacturing piece, services that come out of that piece, and the new digital economy. Because the new digital economy is a large driver of services, a large employer of services. I don't think this is actually captured so far in the public domain as to what value these companies here are bringing to what I call the service ecosystem in the country. Now, just to put in context, when going back 20 years or 25 years, it now looks history, and all of you, I think the founders were in this area, the IT business. When you talk of IT, we used to say that every white-collar job created in the IT business created 5 to 6 other jobs, linked jobs. It could be you employed somebody at home, you employed a driver, somebody came and cleaned your car, somebody supplied you some tea, part jobs, not necessarily full jobs, but 6 jobs. I think the same thing is happening in this ecosystem. Let us say each of these companies are employing 10. I'm sure it's more than 10. And last I talked to Mohandas Pai, he said there are 75,000 startups and maybe 10 to 15,000 every year, could be more. And each one is employing between 10 and 20 people. Now that takes a number well over 1 million. And if there are 6 to 7 linked jobs, you're talking of 7 million employment. They're just linked jobs. Then the services ecosystem this has created, nobody has tried to assess what are the number of jobs created there. So for example, if you have a delivery platform, some of these, how many linked jobs have they created, or related jobs, not linked jobs, in the actual delivery business? I have not seen a count brought out by economists. So what I'm trying to say is that the ecosystem that is being created here is much wider than what is visible. And the opportunity that is there doesn't necessarily come from a NAPFIT being there, but the whole, I would say, the value creation that is possible out of having infrastructure. I think that's the government's idea. But primary idea in pushing an infrastructure bank was that at this stage, commercial banks are able to fund definitely retail and shorter dated money for manufacturing. But if you require 15, 20, 25, 30-year money, that money is not available with commercial banks because they take in current and savings accounts which are virtually on call. And they take fixed deposits 1, 2, and 3, let's say 1.5 years is the average maturity. So their average maturity is about 1 year. And if you have to lend for 15 years, 20 years, you have a mismatch. That is why this bank was created. And I would think that it becomes the provider of funding for infrastructure. And the rest of it gets on.
Yeah. So, you know, a number of secondary opportunities. It would be a good idea to perhaps, run some challenges of what kind of technology opportunities for infrastructure sector can be there. IvyCap, I'm sure, would be glad to participate in that kind of a thing. I just want to refer to one of the pictures which was there about the team, and you saw the number of women which were there in the IvyCap team. You were the first person who sort of broke the entire glass ceiling in the organization. You nurtured number of women leaders. So, while on the team side, yes, there are changes that have happened, but in terms of the startup ecosystem, for instance, about 10 or 15% of our portfolio companies would have women founders. What do you think can be proactive steps that can be done so that there are more women entrepreneurs created?
When it happened in ICICI and today, I think today we are in a much better position. The reason I'm saying is, if you look at the intake pool that was there in, say, 80s and 90s, you take an IIM or an IIT, how many women were there in your class? In my class at IIM, in my engineering class, there were none. In my class at IIM, probably 2% or 3% were women. I think from there, you now come to a situation where you've got probably 35% women in STEM courses. I would think today it is not just women from STEM courses, but women from any background. Could be talent for either founding or for working in an enterprise such as what we see around us. So that barrier of not having a pool, I think, is no longer there. So that point number one. Point number two, what is then required? think what we found is we need to put away biases. I won't make it a long lecture. That biases that come in at three places which we had to neutralize even then. A bias at recruitment stage which says that this job only a man can do. And once a person is in the job, to say that this particular position and this way only a man can do. So for example, we were running the bank branch 2 shifts in 2002, 8 to 2 and 2 to 8. And the point was that after 5 o'clock, women should not be working. So you put this in up front, you have a problem. But you say that's not a problem, but equal opportunity. And we find women had no challenge. This was men who had a perception issue that women can't do this job. So you neutralize this out of the organization, immediately the pool of people who then could rise up increases because they now had equal opportunity. The third place where I see bias that could have come in is opportunity. Next, that is promotion, opportunities, and so on. So you neutralize that. I think the pool then keeps growing on merit, and you will find balance. There should be no imbalance at all. In those days, because the input pool was not deep enough, that is only 5-10% of total pool was women, but now that pool is bigger. It should be much easier to do it. And I compliment Ivy League for having a near equal number of women. It clearly indicates that your processes are absolutely right.
Thank you very much for that. You talked about digital infrastructure. And yes, indeed, that is the new face of India, the success that we have had with UPI and so on. So once again, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities that you see as we head in the next 5 years towards the 5 trillion mark and perhaps the 10 trillion mark by 15 years, and by 25 years, the 25 trillion dream that we have?
Yeah, I think...
I know it's a very huge landscape, but I'm sure if somebody can do justice to this question, you can.
We'll try to paint it. I want to talk of technology in two contexts. One is in the digitech and the fintech space, and a little bit on infrastructure and what we have not seen and how to use it. And I will give 2 examples of how far technology moves and how quickly. It's a very interesting situation. 2018, when I was looking at BRICS Bank, the budget items, I saw a line item, attendance marking system. The item was $250,000. So I called the admin guy and the tech guy and said, look, I'm not going to sign off on this. We are now logging in on the machine, that will do for us. And I sent them back. In any case, we were moving to a new building in 2 years. Shanghai government was building for it. And I said, if you want it, we will see, we'll ask them. I sent them off. Next year, again, I see a line item, attendance marking system. But the number has changed from $250,000 to $15,000. So I thought somebody is trying to pull a fast one on me. 1 0 is not there. So I called them again. I said, what are you guys trying? No, he says, no, the number is 15,000. So I said, now sit down. Tell me how. I may or may not approve it, but tell me how. He said, this is a different system. He says, what's different? This is an Alibaba system. So I said, okay, now I'm even more interested. Explain. He says, this is nothing. There is a slate at where you are coming into the lift, and 4 or 5 slates on each floor. And everything is back-ended to the cloud at Alibaba. And Mr. Kamath, we can tell you what time you came in, what time you got out of your seat, went to the loo, what time you came back, what time you went for lunch, in real-time basis. So for, of course, all employees. I said, that's very good, but I still don't need it because we are going to a new building. But you watch, what I'm trying to say is the education to me was how technology could leapfrog from what we are typically used to as attendance loggers into a virtually, you don't even know that you are being logged. And at each stage, you are tracked and you have data. One use. Another use of technology in terms of something which is very prevalent today. Luckily, in our case, not so. In our case, there is flooding, but in the West, you have got forest fires. So I went to Alibaba a little later just to see what all was happening. I spent a day. So one of the things they demonstrated was very interesting. They said, we have a solution for forest fires, and it's a completely tech-driven solution. So what do we do? Of course, the area, whatever it is, 10 square miles or 10 square, is mapped into a grid. And we have a drone go out and drop a heat sensing chip into each of the grid patterns. The grid could be 1 meter by 1 meter, 10 meter by 10 meter, you decide what it is. But we have a drone which will geo-position that chip into that grid. This is now, we are not yet on fire. This is when things are fine. Now, when there is a fire in a particular spot, we exactly know which grid it is because the heat sensor is sending us this. Now, we again send a drone with whatever is required to douse it, whether it's a chemical or water, and it is doused. So before there's a conflagration, you actually address the issue. So to me, an integration of a problem, an ecological problem in this case, infrastructure problem in this case, well solved by technology. And again, if you look at in China, every single bridge, every single tunnel, the amount of technology that has gone in, modern technology, which didn't exist, say, 5-10 years, in terms of sensors and things like that, is amazing. So there is a whole lot of opportunity in businesses also using technology. Of course, one other example they told me about the heat sensing chip is, it's used in a manufacturing facility or a chemical facility to sense whether there is excess heat generated at any point and immediately send a signal. So it's a plant, you can go and see it, or have ways in which you could address it. So I think there is a whole lot of transition that can happen from what is technologically available to application of it in a real sense. And that itself is an opportunity as we go along. That's one part of it. In the fintech space, I think is where the most disruption will happen. Now, and this is where, my view, coming as a banker, is a little bit of patience is required in this continuum of value and valuation. Value creation in your platform, you're done. You are impatient to create valuation, you will hurt yourself. So give it a little time and it will happen. So let me explain. Now, if you look at today's banking platforms, they are legacy. I used to say in 1998 that global banks have legacy platforms. We are using current state-of-the-art platforms. Now, I laugh and say that I had no choice but to use current platforms those days. I could not afford the mainframes that were there in those days. But a lot has happened since then. But Indian banks are still primarily using technologies that came out during that point of time. I know if you want to be visual about it, this is something like a Sun microsystem box. And things around it is what is being used today. From the mainframe, you went there. But you are not really thereafter. And then came the website. So that's about what you are using. You're still not basically got the mindset of an app that is current and modern, which can disrupt your own business and provide enormous value to your customer. The bank does not have it. But the people here have it. And this is where I say is the opportunity. But a startup tries to leapfrog into a valuation game, it could get crushed because the market will see that still not in a positive stage, you now need money, you won't get that money. And whatever shoots of opportunity you have to grow gets crushed. But the idea that you have and that you are a disruptor is a given. Have a little bit of patience, maybe some partnerships and so on. Also, if I have to give some advice from what I observed, look where the weak point is and enter from that area. So in the financial service business, I found, for example, that online broking probably was the easiest way to enter, where the barriers to entry were very low. Regulator had given vast degrees of freedom. And you have somebody like Zerodha come in and virtually within the first year of the COVID lockdown, become the market leader. And a low-cost platform. He has bootstrapped himself and funded the company. Good for him. Runs a cash flow positive company. It is a good model to understand for others. Not saying please get into that business, but how business was run. And then he is a disruptor because I think he has disrupted, Zerodha has disrupted all incumbents who were there maybe for last 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Same thing I think is about to happen or will happen in one way or the other in the asset management business. I won't go on and on, but there is opportunity everywhere. And these are entire businesses. And within those businesses, a part of the business is where there is further opportunity and probably great value addition. And in this, since you already have developed things, companies who are here and in the similar ecosystem, I think there's a great opportunity to partner. And where I would think that could be gone about it is to actually proactively seek partnerships. Don't wait for the incumbent to come to you. Proactively seek partnerships. In what way, how, you can figure it out. But I think both parties need each other because the incumbent system is otherwise going to be under threat. Having said that, incumbents today, particularly in financial services business, have a huge regulatory shelter. So given that, partnerships become even more important. Because if we wait to say that I'm going to steamroll the large incumbent banks, that may or may not happen because the regulator will provide, and the regulator will say, you then abide by the discipline of the banking sector or the insurance sector or whichever sector, which can be harsh for a startup because you are used to doing things in a nimble way, agile way, and so on, which probably the discipline requirements there are, the partnership is the right way. So value, certainly you have created, you have to monetize that value into a valuation, first get to be cash flow positive. And if you are in the financial services business, I would think looking for partnerships is a good way. The other side also has to look for partnerships, so there is no choice. So I would think that's the way to go. And I'm sure what I've talked about the financial services business, in one way or the other applies in other areas also. And because you are the best judges of that, I do not have experience or expertise in that, but where you are probably, you have it much easier is that where there is no regulatory oversight. In those areas, you are the competitor and you are at the boundary. You can do what you want, which the incumbent cannot do. And you can proceed at great speed.
And in that 25 trillion journey, do you also see a much bigger global role being played by the startups of today? You know, UPI, for instance, is now going to be used by several countries want that. Tomorrow we'll have a health infrastructure and so on. So would that 100%. Form a sizable chunk of that 25 trillion dream?
I think very, very interesting point. In fact, it has to happen. The first round, we provided software solutions. So we were, called names like workshop and that and this and so on. Fine. And then we were in a way taunted, why aren't the big things coming from India and so on. That's also fine. And now we see this coming in a stream. We won't go into why it didn't happen in the past. My answer is very simple. It didn't happen in the past because we did not have a large enough economy to absorb these things. And we did not have the legs to go out there and market these things. So we won't talk about that. But now the situation is different. We have an economy which will grow at 10%, and I'll come to that in a moment, and can absorb, and can absorb in a massive way, like UPI. The ability to absorb 1.4 billion people absorbing online payments. Today, you just talk to your own friends in the US. What is your comparable platform to UPI? None. Of course, Europe, way behind. It's only when you come to China that you have comparable system. And nowhere else is this there. So I'm not just talking about UPI, the whole ecosystem around that. One. Second is the low-cost ecosystem around that. In the West, even if you have it, cost will be very high, whereas we have disrupted cost. So we have not only disrupted the platform, which somebody else was using, we have disrupted cost. So it is scalable now in India. It is scalable across the world. And that's why it will go across the world. If something else was needed, the events today, where blocks have been created and suddenly you have the fear or a threat of sanctions, makes it even more incumbent that you have your own platforms which run. And which are running seamlessly. 1.4 billion people are using it. So why cannot it be taken and extended to countries? And you have got like-minded partners. You've got In this, China is like-minded, Russia is like-minded, Brazil is like-minded, South Africa is like-minded. So basically, you've got your BRICS nations which are like-minded. And I'm sure all players in Southeast Asia are like-minded. Nobody wants to be, basically dependent on a SWIFT in this case, which is, to me, an obsolete technology compared to UPI. So UPI is just an example, but almost everything that we do, given the cost at which we do, is today a scalable and replicable model in any third country. Probably the challenge is that when they take it there, if they have a burn, are they able to take that burn and how long? And those you are the experts. But that's why I'm saying that if they can be cash flow positive here, and at that time think of going global, I think you come to a different equation. So absolutely it's going to happen.
Let me also address another, the theme is Thunder of Dragons, so let me address the other dragon, the big elephant in the room, the dragon. So geopolitically today there is huge competition as far as China is concerned. Now, what should be India's strategy and in terms of should we be competing, should we be collaborating, should we be boycotting? So what would work out best for the growth of economy, especially for the startup ecosystem?
See, my view, having stayed 5 years in China, is very simple. Their interest is economic, primarily. There are other things that are happening, which I won't go into, but those are also ideological issues. So whether it's the border, territory, those are ideological issues. But what I have seen at close quarters is they want to separate the two issues. And they want to look at the economic context in their interest. I think we, of course, also need to look at the economic context in our interest while addressing whatever are the other issues in the way which we think is right. So we need to find that balance to address both and not say that I'm going to shut this off and I'm going to only concentrate on the other. And I found that in China exactly, very clearly during when Doklam happened and we had a problem. They were very clear. They kept the two issues separate. And they kept the situation in the country very cool. There was no excitement about what was happening in Doklam because they wanted the economic agenda to go on. So it was very clear to me that they are playing this on two different levels. Now, as long as it suits us and there is value for us, we should look at it. But we should recognize that we are a large consumer of anything that we do. And if we produce, we can produce anything at an equally competitive cost to what they are doing because we have a large consuming base. And today that consuming base can afford whatever we have to buy. So scale is no longer a problem in India. At 3.5 trillion going to 4 trillion, I think scale is not a problem for anything. And Indian companies will produce for India and for the globe. And I think the government has now realized what are our weaknesses. So for example, chip probably could be the only area where we need to be sure that we make our supply lines are unimpaired and preferably we have our own technology and set up our own capacity. And almost everything else, I think we have access locally or we can get it. Because the other problem could have been energy, not just green energy, but energy. But there again, in the last few years, we have brought down the cost of, let's say, solar so dramatically that it becomes today the energy source of choice because it's cheaper than fossil for India. So we don't need to we don't need to have a transition path. We are already on the transition path. And if green hydrogen grows as is envisaged, I think we are we're a short stage away from, again, meeting our energy needs and in a green manner. So given the size that we have and the fact that we have a lot of things to invest in, opportunity and scope is always going to be there. And third countries will look at us with a great degree of interest as an opportunity for them to do business. And we should leverage that fully. And that includes China. And of course, current events that have happened, China plus one or whatever you call it, we will ride that. But to me, India itself is the biggest opportunity that we could ride on.
You know, when you talk about China and you talked about technology as a key determinator, they can spend more. We still are not able to do the same kind of investment in technology as China is doing, 5G being a classic example where I think they were able to do much more in terms of technology and standards and so on as compared to what India was able to do. And even today, the cost advantage of creating cheap products is still resting with China. So in that kind of a scenario, how do you think we can tackle these issues?
See, I will come to it from a different end. Let's take this ecosystem we have in front of us. This ecosystem doesn't have a cost challenge with China, as I can see. Things that you do, you are on par with China and probably cheaper than China in a lot of ways. There's a lot of cutting edge happening there in AI and stuff which we need to get on. But these are all matters of grey cells rather than of hard equipment necessarily. So in today's transformative digital world, I think there is no disadvantage. In financial services, there is no disadvantage because frankly, in terms of use of technology, our incumbent banks are better placed than China. And our ecosystem that is there, the digital ecosystem that is there, quickly caught up during the last 3-4 years. Again, thanks to most of people here and similar-minded people. So we have neutralized it. Infrastructure today, I think rolling out, the costs are also coming on par. What we lack in, and we acutely lack in, is speed. Because of various things, our rollout of infrastructure is not happening. I think it is now happening in, for example, in the road sector. But other places it is not happening. It is happening in the telecommunication infrastructure rollout. Their costs can come down further, but despite that, we are the lowest cost data provider in the world. So we have addressed it. So the residual part is only the manufacturing bit. And my view is that when a scale kicks in, we will be on par. So I would think, honestly, if you look at today, Maruti as a manufacturer would be one of the cheapest cost manufacturers in the world, like to like, if you go by CC or size or dimensions, compared to even China. Because if you remove distortions caused by subsidies, then everything is equal. Now, the last point there here, which is again not understood, China is a very interesting blend of subsidies, I would say camouflaging things which are rolled over. So a subsidy given in 2009 to the time of Lehman collapse to support people to buy things so that your factories kept working has still not been repaid. It's now, 2018, it had been rolled over 3 times. I don't know after that what happened in 21. So they kept rolling over the debt. So they manage these things in an interesting way, which we may not want to do. And it cannot endure too long. But it endured when you could grow at 10% plus. At 4% growth, that is where you see Evergrande happen, this cooperative bank has shut down, that has shut down, and so on and so forth. So this challenge is there as in China.
So thank you very much for that. One last question and a quick comment from you. What is your advice to Ivycap? So a quick 1 minute on that.
I think I don't even need 1 minute on that. I would just say that think of your runway as 25 years, and you are looking at an economy which is going in those 25 years to 25 trillion. So you keep in your mind 25 trillion in 25 years, everything will fall in place. And the arithmetic of it all, I think, have a strong quantitative background. You can compound it yourself. If you compound at 9%, money will double it will double every 8 years. And we are at 3.5 trillion now. Do the compounding and you'll see we are at 25 trillion economy. So all good wishes to you.
With that, thank you very much and a huge round of applause to Mr. Kamath, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so so much, sir, for such a wonderful conversation. And as you rightly said, if you rush to create value, you will hurt yourself. Patience and perseverance are the name of the game. May I request Sonia to please hand over the token of appreciation? Sir, requested to please come on. And can we also have a photograph, please? A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, once again.